This is a big crowd, and it's a big panel, and I'm going to introduce them one by one. They're not necessarily sitting in this order. In the red, Patricia James, a medicine woman. Thank you. In Patricia James, wave your hand. More volume. Okay. Is a medicine woman, cross-cultural expert, and ceremonialist. For over 25 years, Patricia has studied and been initiated in multiple indigenous and wisdom practices. She's a mixed blood Seminole heritage, as well as a traditionally trained Cheyenne pipe carrier and priest. Julie Megler is a board-certified nurse practitioner in psychiatry and family medicine. She received her Master of Science in Nursing from the University of Miami, Florida. Julie maintains licenses in family medicine and psychiatry in an effort to close the gap between medical and psychiatric care, embodying mind-body connection for effective treatment. Her practice focuses on integrative mental health services. Sita, I'm not going to be able to say it right. Sitaramaya. Sitaramaya is a spiritual herbalist and plant wisdom practitioner formerly trained in the Shipibo ayahuasca tradition. She's been traveling extensively in the Amazon for 17 years, working from, learning with, and engaging with local people who use ayahuasca in ways that draw from traditional practices. Katherine MacLean is director of the Psychedelic Education and Continuing Care Program in New York, has worked as a research scientist on the groundbreaking studies of meditation and psychedelics. Her research in psilocybin and personality change suggests that this class of medicines may play an important role in enhancing mental health, promoting emotional well-being, and creativity throughout the lifespan. And Marc Aixala, a telecommunications engineer and psychologist, was trained in MDMA-associated psychotherapy for PTSD by MAPS and coordinates the iCheers support service and offers integration psychotherapy sessions for people in challenging situations after experiences in non-ordinary states of consciousness. Welcome to all of you.
Self-introduction. Who needs more volume?
Can you hear me? Now?
Apologies.
Good afternoon. My name is Patricia James.
I guess I'll introduce myself. I'm Dr. Tanya Maté. I'm trained as a naturopathic doctor, and I'm the integration director with the Temple of the Way of Light, which is a traditional Shipibo ayahuasca healing center based in Iquitos, Peru. So I split my time between Vancouver and the jungle, and I offer preparation and follow-up care for people before and after they go to the jungle, and then facilitate retreats there. And I'm also Gabor Mate's daughter-in-law, and I've trained with him. So he was my teacher before he was my father-in-law. And I'll tell you guys all that story some other time.
We wanted to begin today in a traditional way. How's this volume? So if you'll take a moment and get your feet on the ground, if you'd like, take your hand and place it over your heart, and begin to connect your breath with your heartbeat. We want to call in and honor the ancestors, because so many of us, probably everybody here, wouldn't be here without those who went before us. The ones who dropped their skin, who taught us, especially the indigenous people and those of religion and science, who had to carry these ways in very, very dangerous times. So we want to give gratitude and thanks for those who came before us and have allowed us to arrive at this place and time, a time of renaissance and a time when our consciousness is needed most. You take a moment and breathe in. I'd like you to recall who are the teachers of your heart. Our ancestors are the great teachers of our heart. And as you bring them into this room with us all today, you can place your male ancestors on your right side, the dynamic, and your female ancestors on the left, the magnetic. And we can always use them as our helping allies. And so what they ask of us is to integrate that into the magnetic, into this time and space, and begin what I call the braided way, taking the healthy male and the healthy aspects of the female and bringing us to this place today. Thank you.
Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for this exciting conversation today. And Patricia just mirrored something that's why we chose each individual here. This is a science conference, and we're talking about integration. And science is really great, but it's also teaching us about what our ancestors and the indigenous perspectives have known for thousands of years. So, Erie and the Psychedelic Continuing Care Program and the Temple of the Way of Light, we're all putting together a workshop tomorrow, but we wanted to make sure that we brought in some other voices that held this balance from a variety of perspectives, balancing the male, the female, cross-generational, and the indigenous and the scientific. So everybody we picked up here today is representations from all those different areas to make sure that we have a full, whole, integrative conversation this afternoon.
And Julie and I are here moderating this conversation, and I just want to take a moment to really thank all of these people for representing both their ancestors in their blood lineages and also their ancestors in terms of their professional and teachers and the people who have trained them to be here. So thanks very much to all of you for being here today.
And so I just wanted to read, for those of you that aren't familiar with the concept of integration, a definition that we at Erie, we're a local organization, came up with, which is that integration refers to the process by which the material accessed and insights gained in an entheogenic experience are incorporated over time into one's life in a way that benefits the individual and their community. And one more definition that I really love that Patricia shared not too long ago with me is integration is really about weaving the mystical with the practical. Yeah. So we're going to segue into, you want to introduce next one?
Yeah, so we're just going to ask each of the people up here to just give a really short overview of the way that they work, the way that they approach integration. So these are all people who do groups and one-on-one sessions with people post-experience, post-healing journey, post-ceremony, whatever that is. So just a really brief intro for them about how they work and why they love doing this work so much. So let's start with Marc.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I work with integration so I see integration like a twofold thing. One is to maximize the benefits of an experience, but also to reduce the challenges that we can encounter after an experience. And in my professional work, I mostly work in the second phase. So the people that contact me is people that they would not wanted to contact me usually. So it's the experience has gone in a difficult way, and they are facing challenges in the daily life afterwards. So I specialize more in dealing with difficult experiences after a psychedelic experience or an ayahuasca experience, and this is the integration work that I do. Is that enough? Yeah.
So I hold integration as a very integral part of life. And I look at it as a cycle. And the landscape of the way I approach it is that initially we have an experience, and how do we integrate it? And integration is primarily about teaching people to be present, because we can't make change or transformation without being present in the moment. So I hold integration as the crucible for that. I use nature and gratitude and prayer and meditation. It's traditionally called the blessing way. So nature is, or the beauty way. Beauty opens our hearts, and beauty is a healing agent on its own. And so when we start our day with a prayer or an intention, and generally the intention follows an action, and the action is usually around taking a life-affirming action on your behalf. And then gratitude keeps our hearts open. The other thing that happens is if we have a gratitude practice at the end of the day, we begin to change our neural path about realizing there's more working in our life than not, which thanks to neuroscience, we're learning so much about our nervous system that we know we're wired for fight, flight, freeze. This begins to shift that. And then lastly, and most importantly in my traditions, is time in nature. Nature comes from the Latin word latus, which means to be born. And so nature also begins to get us in touch with things that are outside of ourselves. And it helps us get into the cycles and the rhythms, which is where healing happens, slow to medium rhythms with nature.
Thank you for that. Everything that I do in my life right now is an act of integration coming from some very challenging experiences with death and birth and psychedelics over the last 5 years. I want to share a definition of integration from one of my dear friends and teachers who helped walk with me during that time period. And everything that I do, a lot of that is learned from him. So he said, integration is a deliberative, active participation as well as an allowing. Integration is a process of stepping into and trusting that meaning-making is an ongoing, ordinary human capacity that happens throughout your life. So that's James Lohr. He's one of our advisory board members in New York. I sit with people who've had usually really bad experiences with psychedelics in Manhattan. I live on a farm, so I bring that energy with me. I have a Buddhist meditation practice, so I bring that with me. I'm not a therapist. The only thing I've been trained to do is sit with people on high doses of psilocybin. And I'm learning how to help people in the aftermath of those experiences and learning a lot about other plant medicines that I don't have a lot of intimate, direct contact with. What I try to share with people is from my own path of learning how to trust and let go and be open in the experience itself and especially afterward. And so what I've learned is it's a lot about relationship, and especially in cities, people have really connected experiences on psychedelics, and then in the aftermath, they feel very lonely and isolated and disconnected from themselves, from each other, and from nature. And so I'm trying as much as possible to give people access to the psychedelic experience while they're sober. And it's working pretty well.
So my approach to integration includes the preparation for the experience. I believe, as you said, we're integrating all the time. And this idea and practice of being prepared before the experience for the integration after the experience is also key. So things like allowing enough time after the experience, or actually scheduling in time after the experience to process it, perhaps have more formal integration sessions with someone. And I believe integration applies not to experiences that we may have perceived or felt as challenging or difficult, but to the joyful experiences and the blissful experiences and the oceanic state of oneness that we might feel. How do we integrate that as well? And a lot of my work now is somatically based, like really being in the felt realm as opposed to the story realm and the narrative. But how do we allow ourselves and open to feeling our experience and allowing it to seed in our body? No matter what happens in our life, what we experience, our body has been present every step of the way, from the moment of conception. And it's a really powerful container and temple. And I believe that we can access that to help have our experiences be powerfully, positively productive and meaningful for months and years to come, really. Thank you.
So we're going to field a couple questions directly to each of the individuals on stage and see how far we get in the conversation from there. And then if there's time at the end, hopefully open up to some questions in the audience. I just want to take a moment to apologize. The intention was also to have each of our organizations and names and contact info up on the slide, but didn't quite get uploaded appropriately. So if you guys want to just look in the pamphlet, you can probably find some more information about each of us if you want to contact us at another time. But let's start with the first question. So, Sita, it's nice to see you up here. We're both really involved in somatic experiencing, which is a type of trauma-based therapy, and we both feel that it informs the integration work in a really beautiful way and is very complementary. So I was wondering if you could specifically speak about the concept of coherence in somatic experiencing and how that relates to integration and is a beneficial concept to know about and explore.
Yeah, thank you. So I think I've been thinking about this a lot. So for those who are unfamiliar with somatic experiencing, or SE, this is work that is body-based and trusting the wisdom of the body. The body knows what to do. And so when we are in a state of coherence, some of the words that that might come to mind or be connected with that are connectedness, being open, a harmonic resonance, engaged, a felt sense of calm alertness, when our nervous system is calm and ready to experience the world around us in a positively modulated way. Somebody mentioned this, the opening, this connection between the heart and the breath. This is coherence. So, and in somatic experiencing and in the work that we do, it, for me, takes on a bit of a shamanic element, really, because there is the coherence between the practitioner and the client. And so oftentimes what happens in a powerful psychedelic experience or ayahuasca experience or other transformational experience, we become activated. And sometimes we're not quite resolved. We haven't come back to a baseline post-experience. And when we work with somebody who is in a coherent state, who is regulated, that practitioner can help to impart that to the client so that we then become resonant. And so some of that material can slowly be brought up and titrated, and the experience worked through, and then we return to a settled state again. And so this is the process of moving through something as opposed to going around it or bypassing it, but holding a safe container to experience parts of the experience, because we're typically not going to have an integration session that lasts 6 or 8 hours or as long as the original experience. And the beauty of it is it's not required. We can just take these snippets and activate a little bit, be in coherence with the practitioner, and create a safe space where we can then embody those experiences. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. I think that I just kind of want to reemphasize this idea of if you're facilitating integration, there's this kind of idea that you can only take your client as far as you've taken yourself. So the more coherent you are, the more that you're able to go into activation or freeze states, but be able to gently kind of recalibrate, and you're going to be picking things up from your client. So you need to have a really solid state of coherence so that you can be working most effectively with individuals, working towards their own coherence so that they can carry that with themselves in their own life.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. And so what comes to mind, if I didn't say it, this presence, and really it's a harmonic resonance, right? So we're in harmony. And another way to think about coherence is by thinking about incoherent. So many of us are familiar, she was incoherent, I couldn't understand a word she said, or he was incoherent in babbling. So when we think about what the opposite of that might be, this calm, connected, clear communication, both within ourselves, between ourselves, and our guide or our practitioner, our facilitator, you might imagine how our nervous system may become more regulated in that kind of environment.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything they want to contribute to that? No? We'll pass the mics down and move on to the next question.
All right, so, somatic experiencing is this body-based kind of trauma therapy, and a lot of work of integration involves, bringing people into their body and cutting through story. So, Katherine, I'm interested particularly in your approach, your ideas about how it's important and how you do get people into their bodies and how getting out of the story is helpful.
Yeah, I'm so glad that, Sita, you described the somatic experiencing, because that was actually a therapy that was really helpful for me. I had been meditating. I was trying to meditate my way through some traumatic experiences, and I didn't realize until I was a few months into somatic experiencing therapy that she caught it in the moment that I dissociated. And I was like, I've been dissociating while sitting in meditation for like all this time, and no meditation teacher had caught it. And so it was really an interesting insight for me that a pleasant, what I felt to be present-centered experience was actually disconnected from my body, and protective in a certain way. And so I found that very helpful. And what I came up with a technique that it's probably not original. When I work with people in groups, I started off by just teaching them mindfulness of breathing. And then I ask people, after they all do this very classic Tibetan Zen, all the different traditions have this focusing on the breath technique. And what I found is it didn't really work, because people were just so excited to share their psychedelic experiences that as soon as they did a few minutes of focusing on their breath, then they kind of snapped back into the mode of like, I have this awesome story I want to tell, or I have this really terrible story I want to tell. And everyone actually enjoyed the group, but I felt like it was lacking some of the healing potential that I had experienced by actually being in my body. And so I kind of came up with a technique over the course of several months that, if any of you can think of a good name for this technique, it needs like a name, but I call it mindfulness of experience. And so what I do is I take people first to their breath, and then through each of the different sense gates, so the eyes, the ears, the skin, the mouth, the nose. And I ask them to think of a single experience from their past, and then invite in the eyes and experience what were you seeing in that experience? What were you hearing? What were you feeling in your body? What were you tasting? What were you smelling? And it's only about 10 minutes, but it seems to bring people into a different relationship with their past experience that isn't about the story. And I mean, it is about the story, but it's like asking the body to be a participant rather than it's just something that happened to my body. And I think also, like, I like to think about the eyes and the ears and all these different portals of information that they get to actually have a voice and tell you things that maybe you forgot. And so it's a way, and I'm still kind of working on this, and I'm very open to feedback and suggestions, but it seems like in a group of strangers who have all had really powerful experiences, but are in that moment, they just got home from, they just got back from work, it's in the middle of Manhattan, they're remembering certain aspects of the story and not necessarily what they actually felt. And so that's a really interesting practice, and just kind of keeping people in their bodies. And then I just keep with my secret agenda of trying to get everyone to practice meditation more. I often just end up...
It's not a secret anymore.
I know. It's not a secret. I just really encourage people to practice on their own and keep along with whatever technique helps them feel safe and present in their body, and just to find something that they can do on their own for 10 minutes a day while they continue exploring, and not to be afraid of the body feeling uncomfortable.
Beautiful. So I really, so one of my secret agendas that I'm about to unsecret is I want everybody who's doing psychedelic work to be getting help from actual people. And so you mentioned, there's an important part of it that you need to do on your own. There's work that you have to do on your own in order to integrate, in order to progress, in order to grow. But you mentioned this really important thing about it was a trauma therapist that caught that you had been dissociating for however many years. And without somebody helping you, without somebody catching that, you would have kept doing it. So I'm curious about, your role as a facilitator in terms of catching people when they're actually just pretending.
It's tricky. I'm very happy. I want to bring everyone's attention to Ingmar Gorman, somewhere in this room, wherever he is. He can raise his hand. He's hiding. So Ingmar is my clinical counterpart. He's trained as a clinical PhD, and so I often go to Ingmar for advice around my own frustrations. And one of those frustrations is I've actually seen people change really quickly in a really positive way after taking a high dose of psilocybin. And so I forget that the change process is really slow. And so every time that I find that I actually want to jump in, I kind of take a step back and say, maybe for this person, even though they're kind of pretending or talking around something, and I've learned this over and over, that every time I'm a little impatient or I want to get to the point and help you right now, it takes several months, and then all of a sudden that person's like, this is the only place that I have ever felt safe. And I'm like, I am so happy I didn't scare you away by being like, you need to do this to feel better. And so it's really been a process for me, is every time I think I know a little bit about what's going on, I kind of question that and step back. And just first and foremost, it's really about helping people feel safe. And so the littlest thing that I will sometimes do is if someone starts saying, what happens when you take mushrooms? And it's really as simple as just saying, how is it when you, for you? And they say, oh, in my experience, or when I take mushrooms. So little things like that, more about taking it to the direct experience. But yeah, for a lot of people, it's the first time they've ever talked about it in a group. And so it's that balance of how do you not scare someone away and keep them hopefully coming back enough to...
Awesome. Beautiful. Does anybody else have anything to say on that topic?
Yeah, I really rely on the breath a lot. And so when people are doing that, the Navajo have a way of identifying this as a floating cloud. So people have great revelations and great story, and they talk about that, but they don't ever attach an action to it. And so nothing manifests unless there's some action step. And to bring it back to the breath, and often the feet. So sometimes my homework with people is experience how your feet touch the earth. And really pay attention to that. And if they're tingling, then you're in contact with the earth. That helps bring people back to the present. And that's where choice comes in. And choice is also empowering. And people can choose not to do something positive. And that's something that you just have to accept. But the goal is to create some positive exercises and experiences for them so that they can incorporate it little by little by little. What we're learning from trauma and neuroscience is that the breath and meditation are key to helping self-regulate the nervous system. And so the easiest thing is just what we were doing to begin with, is synchronize your breath with your heart, and then that also begins to create safety as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Patricia. Yeah.
One of the techniques that I use often to integrate experiences, especially challenging experiences, is holotropic breathwork. Some of you may know about it. And as I was listening to you, I thought that it had a lot of resemblance to what happens in breathwork. I see breathwork as a non-specific tool for integration, in which you don't have to direct what is going to happen. So people come and breathe, and it can take them to a cognitive experience in which they reframe what happened during the challenging experience, or they can go into a full somatic kind of catharsis and let go the physical tensions that accumulated during the traumatic experience. So there is something that usually I suggest to people that are in difficult experiences after a psychedelic experience, to do breath work in a good setting with a good facilitator in a controlled environment, because it seems that it can actually give you like a gentle push to move forward of the point that you're in. And I've seen this happening in many situations. People coming and saying, I've had an ayahuasca experience 2 years ago, and I never dared to take ayahuasca again because I'm so scared of that. I'm still experiencing nightmares and all that. And they come to one of the workshops that we organize. They have one experience with breathwork, and they come back to what happened in that original situation, but in a gentle way. They feel safe. They feel that they can explore that, and after that, it's like, okay, now I can move forward. So for me, breathwork is a fantastic tool in which I don't really need to know what the person needs to experience. I just provide the container, and the experience can continue unfolding. So.
I would just like to underscore your comment about feeling the experience, being with your feelings. And another gentle suggestion is to personalize the experience, the you, right? People saying you when it's I. And there's just such a powerful shift in saying I and claiming our experience as our own in our body, in our felt sense awareness, which often doesn't have words. And so I agree with what everyone has said about this felt experience as opposed to the story experience. And yes, we need the story as a frame of reference, but to not get caught up in it and really be in our felt sense awareness of what happened, and to trust that there is this innate intelligence and wisdom in the body to guide us.
I think I'd like to add really quickly. Most people in the West are disassociated. They are not embodied. So if you can do anything to begin to start, to deal with that from the get-go, it's helpful.
So this kind of perfectly segues into the next topic of conversation, which is spiritual bypassing.
Spiritual bypassing.
Whoa, 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 whoa. We're going to direct this one towards Patricia. And the question that I have in particular is it's a two-part question. One is, how does spiritual bypassing get in the way of integration? And then kind of another after fact is, why is it important to have somebody there to support you or call you out in your spiritual bypassing, even if you know what it is and how to keep an eye out for it? Why is it still important to have peers or mentors there to call you out?
And maybe before answering those questions, you could just give us a quick definition of what spiritual bypassing is.
Well, spiritual bypassing was identified in the 1980s, by a psychologist, John yeah. And it's when somebody is really not dealing with their emotional issues or the pain and masking it or veiling it in a spiritual practice, going to a text, being always so sweet and calm and nice. And it's just, it's a part of, in a sense, it's a metaphysical limbo. So it's not really moving into the pain or into the wound or into what is needing to be integrated and dealt with. And so a good way of identifying that, why it's always nice to work with somebody and somebody who can call you on it, is one, often we don't know we're there. And the other, our growth edge is right on the other side of fear. So for us to move into that healing, we've got to have somebody either there holding the space for us, coaching us through that fear. And once you do that, then you open up into infinite possibility. So it's helpful also to have somebody identify and guide you through that. And sometimes just identifying a little practice. When I was going through something, my teacher gave me two things. I had to not want something from that person, and I had to hold them with an open heart. So if you have this container of a possibility that you're seeking, it helps you gauge through that. And so the other thing, sometimes I'll use haiku, a way, or this is when mantras and mudras and things like that come in, but always practice. So my practices that I, suggest to people, always get them, like, for instance, in nature. It begins to, I was taught that the universe speaks to us through nature. So when we can begin to watch things or watch our allies or bring in our ancestors, we're starting to gather our own medicine. The other thing, I'm digressing a little, when we are hitting our growth edge and that fear place is where our opportunity for wholeness comes in. And so that's the path. And so so practices are really important. I think spiritual bypass and some of these other things we're talking about, you know, there's an old saying around the indigenous people, you can take the medicine, but you still have to do the work. And there's just no easy fix. And it's a lifelong project. You know, Earth School has a lot of lessons for us. And so it's embracing them and finding some good people to go along the journey with. Is that?
Yeah, totally.
answer?
I'm kind of curious if anybody has any other thoughts, but one of the things that we see a lot of times in our integration circles is, big tall tale sign of spiritual bypassing is people kind of jumping from ceremony to ceremony before they've even fully committed themselves to their integration process, because it's a commitment. You know, integration isn't just this thing you do, it's kind of this way of life. So I was wondering if anybody had any comments on that. But before that, I just wanted to share real quick. Larry has designed these great little pins, and it says, "Love and light casts a dark shadow." And we're selling them at the Erie stand. And if you're interested in checking them out, we'd love the donation in exchange for one. But it speaks so perfectly and succinctly to spiritual bypassing. But yeah, if you guys have any thoughts about how spiritual bypassing shows up in your groups.
Yeah, sure. I'm glad you brought that up about going from ceremony to ceremony. I always feel kind of like a bummer for people because I'm always emphasizing all these really great things you can do while not taking drugs. And a lot of people in New York especially, it seems like the lifestyle in New York City is so painful for so many people that the thing they really look forward to is ceremony. And I get it. It's like there's this need to want to leave that immediate suffering. And even if it's terrible, at least in some ways, at least it's different than the mundane, chaotic, kind of disconnected, running through buildings and office spaces life. And then people get to the groups, and oftentimes if someone's really struggling with anxiety and flashbacks and relived trauma, I sometimes not so gently say, I think you need to take a break from these ceremonies. Even if you really love this community and this medicine, your body is telling you to stop or just take a break. And then, of course, I get into dangerous territory because I also encourage people to take breaks from everything they're doing in their life, including work and relationships.
Quit your job, get a divorce.
But so, yeah, I end up, I think always, like, if I suspect that that's what's going on, I encourage letting go and just stopping the thing that people think is actually helping them or causing this stuff to come up, and then see. Because you can always go back. It's like, and so anyway.
Yeah, I think that community piece is really important, because I see a lot of people who go to ceremony and go to ceremony and go to ceremony because that's the only time they get to be with that community. And I remember Marc saying something at his talk in Brazil, that if we had proper communities, we wouldn't even need integration. It would just happen. And you come to a conference like this, and it's like a ceremony the whole time. Everybody's connected, and everybody can be themselves in whatever weird way they want to be, and everybody's interesting and doing great things. And then a whole bunch of us, not me, but a lot of us are going to go back to office jobs, Going to need to integrate the conference.
Yeah. The sign of spiritual bypass, it also shows up when there is a hyper-focusing on the visions and the psychedelicness of it all, and an inability to translate that into any kind of personal experience.
Awesome.
Usually I don't get a lot of people with spiritual bypass because they don't experience much suffering. When we are bypassing, we don't experience the anxiety of what we are bypassing. But sometimes people do, especially in these situations in which they go from ceremony to ceremony to ceremony. So, and then it's interesting because the content of the psychotherapy sessions is all about what happens in the sessions, and we see this phenomenon about the visions, about the psychedelicness of what happened, but not about what is going on in the life of the person. And there's some discomfort, but some people are not able at the moment to identify where the discomfort is coming from, and this is because they are bypassing this, like the real thing that is bothering in their lives at the moment. But it's interesting that sometimes they ask for help, so yeah.
I think this is when you really need to suggest and encourage practices for people. You know, you really can't do this work without some good practices. And when there's no answer, you rely on your practices, and the wisdom voice comes in.
Awesome, thank you. So now we're going to, well, I'm going to direct this question at Marc, and we're going to see what else comes of it. But this is something that I'm really curious about. Integration. I mean, there's a party tonight called integration. It's a hot buzzword right now, and a lot of people are doing it, and there aren't standards of practice or anything like this. And there's some people who have been doing it for a very long time, and some of us who are brand new to it. And I see a lot that integration and therapy are kind of getting conflated, and people are calling it integration therapy. And sitting up here, we have one therapist and several people who use therapeutic tools in the way that they work, but are not therapists. So Marc, I noticed in your presentation, you made a distinction between integration and psychotherapy. So I wonder if you could speak to that.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's not that easy question to answer, but they both have very similar things. They are both therapeutic interventions. So when you are doing integration interventions, they are aimed to be therapeutic. They are aimed to help the person. And same thing with psychotherapy. But I would say that the main difference, I would say there are two main differences. One is the focus of the intervention. So when someone asks you specifically for integration, what you're going to be dealing with is what happened with experience. I mean, they were someone before the experience, they had an experience, and now they are experiencing some discomfort that before was not there. So this is what you're going to be working on. You're going to be working on the specific objective that the person has. They are asking you about, this is what happened in my experience, and this is what I'm experiencing now related to that, so I want to work on this. But also the kind of relationship that you have with the person is different than the relationship that you have with someone that specifically asks you to do therapy. So when I do integration sessions, I try to stick to the experience. I don't open a lot the focus on family issues or work situation. I mean, if that is not related to the content of the experience, because then you have the risk of stepping into a space that you have not been invited to. You know, so when I do interventions in integration, I do not consider myself a therapist per se. It's like, okay, this person is asking me to do some specific intervention, but they have not asked me to be a therapist. So I am careful in that situation. But it's true that my therapist background and training appears there, you know, so the way that I work, in a way, it's similar to what I do afterwards. But for me, there are some signs that show me that the intervention in integration is getting to an end, and we are stepping into psychotherapy. And this is the point in which I might suggest that, okay, it seems that the focus is changing, and maybe we need to end this intervention in integration. So for me, when the content of the sessions is not anymore about the experience itself, or it shifts into family, it shifts into more like patterns in the life of the person, more personality traits, that's the moment for me to stop the intervention and reframe that. I mean, are we doing something different now? Do you want to continue with this, or it's okay? Usually people, they don't want further interventions, and I remember the case of a woman I was working with. She had taken ayahuasca, like 20 ceremonies in 5 months, something like that. She was all over the place. And we were dealing basically for 10 or 12 sessions only with the content of the experience and trying to bring it back to planet Earth. You know, it was so far out. It was a matter of, okay, what does it have to do with you? And the moment that she connected with, okay, you know, I don't really like my life. My job is terrible. I have relationship problems, and I've been struggling with anxiety for many, many years. That's the moment that the integration stopped. You know, she didn't require my services anymore, and she had found all the problems that she had. You know, like my job doesn't work. I have anxiety and this and that. But now I know what happened. You know, so and then she said, maybe I called you in few months' time. You know, yeah. And so I think that exemplifies what I mean by
awesome.
that.
Thank you. And I want so badly to hear what everybody else has to say, but we're going to not do that, and we're going to open up to questions. One more quick question first, just to you. How important do you think it is that working as an integration facilitator, how important it is to have had those experiences yourself.
That's a good question, and sometimes I disagree with this. I think we've said it here, no? That you cannot take a person to where you have not been, something like that. But I think that my role as a therapist is not to take anyone anywhere, you know? So people come with suffering, people come with problems, and then it's like, I haven't had panic attacks, but I think I can help people with panic attacks. So I don't think that I need to be experiencing panic attacks to help someone that is having flashback or panic attacks. But of course, that understanding the challenges and the difficulties of an integration period after a difficult experience, I think it's extremely important, you know, because then you can see that the suffering is real. It's not something that people are making up. You know, it can seem like not so strong on the outside, but if you know how difficult has it been for me after a difficult experience, then you take things in a different way. And then it helps me to be more compassionate, for example, and to relate more to the person. Like, wow, I mean, this can be like a core issue for the person, so let's be careful with the person. I think that this is what can bring the personal experience to the therapy.
Beautiful. Thank you. There's so much more that I want to hear and say about all of that, but we're going to find out what you guys want to hear about. So who has questions?
If you could just, if you could line up over here and we'll take questions
great.
for a couple minutes.
I know that line.
Yeah, if you want to ask a question to a particular person, just say their name when you're asking.
My question is not for anyone in particular, but I'd be curious to hear from any of you. But the question is, how do you know when sort of the homework assignment that you've gotten from medicine work is done and when to go back for more medicine? And I ask because I feel like I'm pretty good on integration in terms of doing meditation practices and therapy and talking and processing. And I actually really don't like doing medicine work. The experiences are pretty uniformly unpleasant, and I found that I think that that's because I'm accessing parts of myself that are unpleasant to access, but I'm accessing something that I can't get at by any other means. Okay. Yeah. But I wonder, like, after the first time I drank ayahuasca, it was 1.5 years before I did it again, and then it was about 1.5 years after that, and I wonder sometimes maybe I'm waiting too long, or maybe I should rely on the medicine more than I am.
Well, I've always been taught that you always integrate before you go back. And you might consider some other modalities, breath work, drum journeys, some other things so that you can learn to weave in and out a little more effortlessly. And you may try some other experiences.
I just want to remind people who are in line, we don't have a lot of time, so if you could please get to your question succinctly, it would be very much appreciated.
Hi. So I'll just add one thing, and that is how often and how much time in between. It really depends on the situation and the person. And hopefully we have skilled, knowledgeable, available, accessible practitioners that we can consult with that can help guide us, who are there helping us in the experience, and then say, well, you know, maybe 3 months, or you're in touch with them and can receive that kind of feedback and guidance.
I was just going to say, we now have our contact info up there too, so if you want more directed questions about when and where, you can contact us individually too.
Hi, my question's for Katherine. I believe it was you who mentioned breath work is important in integration, or somebody did. Can you be more specific about what kind of breath work you would recommend?
But you talk about it.
I was talking about mindfulness of breathing as a Buddhist meditation practice, which is not breath work. It's more of a natural sitting practice where you're letting your breath do what it does and bringing all your awareness to the breath. And my understanding, I know there are lots of different types. I've only seen one directly, that breathwork is very different than that.
Yeah, when I was talking about breathwork, I meant specifically holotropic breathwork, which is Stanislav's way of doing that. That's the only method I'm trained in, so yeah.
Thank you. Very helpful panel. And I'm just wondering about group integration versus individual integration, just what your experience might be and the difference.
Well, since I have the microphone, I'm going to start.
Go for it.
So basically, I mostly do individual sessions because of the nature of the demand of the person. People come with anxiety, with like acute stress disorder. So in these situations, I would say that individual session works better because you can spend more time dealing with the problem of the person. But I do believe a lot in the power of the community and the group. And I think that groups and the social dimension of integration is extremely, extremely important. And therefore, if it's not an emergency situation, I would always go for group integrations, because then you have witnesses of your commitment. You know, it's like, I've seen this in my experience and I'm going to do that. And you've sat in front of, 20 people. So that's also a way of honoring the experience that you've had. Yeah.
And I think it depends on the individual as well, if you're comfortable in a group or in a one-on-one.
Okay. I was just wondering, for someone that is experiencing spiritual bypass and going through ceremony after ceremony, not getting any benefit, do you ever see anyone that is experiencing that but does break through by continuing to do ceremony? Like if there's one that eventually just does it for them, and if so, what is it? Are they doing anything different during that time that actually causes that for them?
I'd say no.
I would say eventually people hit a wall, but unfortunately it ends up being when people's bodies really scream no, and then their nervous systems are so blown out from doing so many ceremonies that they have to stop. And then it's way more than just integrating. It's kind of, there's a lot more, it becomes much more complex to start integrating.
I'll just add as it goes by, I'll just just reflecting on my own experience, what I ended up doing is actually calling in a lot of different types of friends, like real human being friends and teachers from different perspectives and backgrounds, so that I could use that as a kind of checks and balance against my own choices. So I would kind of go into this particular space a little bit, trying to work with an experience or integrate it, and then come back. And then if the psychedelic stuff seemed too, like it really wasn't working, I would go talk to my Buddhist friends, or I would talk to my friends who aren't into either meditation or psychedelics. And I found myself like kind of creating a community of like more advanced spiritual people than me, to be like, can you help like just walk with me a little bit so I can not go off the path too much? So I really just like surrendered myself to people who knew a lot more than I did, and really trusted their advice, and just found a bunch of different ones, so I wasn't just trusting one person.
Yeah, I would echo the value in that as well. And it is important, because then you begin to gather your own medicine. Your healing process is part of your medicine path.
I would say that this can happen as we mature in our process, so you can be aware that you are bypassing. But sometimes this breakthrough you were talking about, what I've seen is more a breakdown that really makes you kind of pay attention to what is going on, and then you're back on track in a painful way, but yeah.
And just really quick, you can have an unhealthy or a healthy relationship with anything, and say somebody's got drug or alcohol addiction and then they come to ayahuasca, and then they're using ayahuasca ceremony as kind of like an addiction. It's healthier. And it's possible to develop a healthy relationship with that. Sometimes it takes a break, but what's really required is a shift in that relationship with the medicine. And one of the best ways that I've seen that happen is by deepening your relationship with that practice with dieta, or going deeper into the tradition. So not just going to ceremony, but actually deepening that relationship and gathering your own medicine, like Patricia was saying.
Go for it.
Can't tell what's happening.
You and
They
Hat.
told me they were out of time, and then they changed their minds.
Ah.
My question is rather rhetorical, but we're talking about ancient wisdom, bringing that into contemporary science. I'm wondering about the ancient tradition or wisdom about Kundalini, and I haven't heard that mentioned at all in this conference. And I, for one, know of many people whose psychedelic has triggered Kundalini, and most of the time they don't even know what that term is. And the question is, how do we bring Kundalini into contemporary science?
Well, there is a Kundalini research network that's quite knowledgeable, and I know they meet annually, and they have quite a lot written. Kundalini is definitely a very important quality and path. So there is at least a resource, and that's a very good question to have brought in.
Yeah, the cases I've seen that could be understood as Kundalini experiences, actually, the ones that I've worked with, they are really, really difficult to work with. The manifestations are very, very strong, a lot of physical manifestations. So I have to say that I have not been very successful with that. I think that requires like a real broad, a big scope, like from the spiritual all the way to the behavioral approaches to deal with that. So yeah, I think that's one of the challenges. I mean, Christina Groff, she was dealing with a Kundalini awakening for all her life, so yeah.
You definitely need a specialist.
I also believe that experiences of the Kundalini rising, we have to be careful whether or not that is also a trauma release, because it can look very similar. And it's also something that can be worked with in the ceremony. Certainly there's the integration afterwards, but there's a lot of opportunity for working with that kind of energy in the ceremony as well with a proficient practitioner.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have today, so thank you all for being part of this conversation. Thank you. And we look forward to seeing some of you tomorrow, hopefully. Otherwise, let's keep on expanding this conversation more and more. This conference needs more of the integration work. Thank you.